So I want to do a top 10 list of things that we're going to see this season that we likely don't see again in any season after this. That will make this season feel particularly unique. And some of these items are going to be tough for the players. Some of it is going to be a huge reward for fans. I mean, if you're going to be upset that you're not going to see certain teams this year, it's understandable. But at the same time, I think that the schedule we're going to see play itself out is going to be just fantastic. Something completely different and unique. So, in terms of interesting things for this year, the ads, I think, are going to be a lot this year. Now, I once you let that in, I'm talking about like ads on helmets and wherever else those ads might go. Once you've allowed those revenue streams in, it's really hard to get them back out. So, those may not be unique to this season. And then the no fans part as well. Most locations will not have fans in attendance to start. The Sharks could start the season homeless. And then as the season goes along, we should see fans in attendance. Some of that money being made up by the NHL. And once we get into playoff time, which is in May, we should have fans in attendance, I would think, in all 31 markets. But we'll see. So those are the two honorable mentions. Ads and no fans in attendance to start the season. Number 10. And I know this from previous shortened seasons. So you know when you get into January and it's kind of boring? You know, when you get into that part of the year where it kind of feels like all the teams are kind of just going through the motions? That's not going to happen this year. Shortened schedules like this one, 56 games, we're not going to see that, oh, well, they're just going through the motions. They'll pick it up later. This is going to be intense from beginning to end, and I would be very, very surprised if we actually see any kind of a malaise or a lull in the middle of the season. Number 9, this is possible. I think it happens. Fighting could be up this year. Now, I've got the question marks. I'm not sure. But to me, you have all these divisional rivalries, and you're playing multiple games against the same team night in and night out. Odds are, you're going to probably see some more fighting going on. Because, as I said in a recent video, by about game 3 or 4, you're going to be like, I don't like the look of your face. And especially, it feels like the Northern Division, the Canadian Division, they're really amping up, bringing in as many agitators as possible. And so if you cheer for a team that lacks the agitators, you might have a very long season. And we may see a lot of fighting in every division. So I'll go with that as number 9. Number 8. This may be a year-over-year thing now. So we're used to UFAs getting their 7-8 year contracts, big money. Now we may see more hired guns. Think like Mike Hoffman signing the 1-year deal in St. Louis. We're probably going to see a lot of that happening. Probably next year as well, which is why I'm not putting this higher up, because this may just be the way things are until we start seeing the salary cap moving up again and GMs are willing to open up their pocketbooks, and while the owners are willing to open up the pocketbooks for the GMs and give those really big long-term contracts. That may not happen for a while. So we may see more situations where a guy may take less money to go to a contending team with the idea that, well, I'm not going to make my money on this contract. I'd like to go somewhere to win. So things may get very interesting because for those teams at the top, they may very well be able to get players to come in and play for a lot less money than they would want to get paid to play elsewhere. And it may make it more difficult for some teams to catch up. So look for a situation where we're getting more hired guns as the season goes along. There's still UFAs out there. Watch them to take less money, and basically they'll be UFAs next summer. We may see some that extend their time in the city after signing that 1-year contract, but don't be surprised if a lot of them end up being UFAs again next year. Number 7. So I've been seeing, every time that somebody signs, somebody gets traded, you see the stats guys come out with, this guy helps this and hurts this, and your danger chances go up and they go down, and this guy's really good in this. Here's the thing. The stats this year are going to be wildly unpredictable. Here's an example of why. let's just say Connor McDavid feasts on all the Canadian teams and he struggles against your traditional Central Division or your traditional Metro Division. If you are now putting him in a situation where he's only playing against teams he feasts on statistically, you may see wildly high stats for a player. Conversely, let's just say that you have, let's say Stamkos struggles against teams that are going to be in the Central Division this year. His stats could be down. So when you're doing your fantasy drafts and everything, you have to consider, how does this guy play against other teams in Canada if I'm going to draft a guy on a Canadian team? How does this guy traditionally play against other teams in California if he's now in the West and he plays for St. Louis or Minnesota or Colorado? Because you're not playing outside of your own division. So that really, to me, throws the stats up in the air. And that brings me to number 6. The divisions. The divisions are unequal. And this is something that I know people are going to be kind of shrugging off right now, but wait for it. Just wait for it. So you have a second-round draft pick of Pittsburgh. There right now, you look at that draft pick and you go, well, I don't know, that draft pick isn't going to be as valuable as a second-round draft pick of the Kings, right? You go, well, the Kings aren't as good as Pittsburgh, so that draft pick's going to be worth more. But what if the Kings have a much easier time in their division than Pittsburgh has in theirs, and the Kings end up with a better record? Now that Penguins draft pick's more important and more expensive. And it's one of those things where somebody at some point this year is going to say, and I guarantee we're going to see this as we get into the season, I don't like these divisions, this isn't fair. That team has a record of, say, 8-4. My team has a record of 4-8, but my team played against these really strong contenders, and all they did was go to California, and all they did was play against other Canadian teams. There will be an excuse. There will be a reason, and people are going to be upset because where this leads to and is connected to is number 5, the lottery. So we're looking at the divisions right now and we're saying, so the divisions aren't equal. And I don't have a problem admitting that. Yeah, the divisions are not equal. I look at the divisions on my power rankings board. I have everything split by divisions. There's no way I can say those are equal. So at the end of the year, when the top 4 teams in each division makes the playoffs, and you've got all the teams that didn't make the playoffs in the lottery, if you go by points, you say, so we're going to say the team with the least amount of points ends up with the best chance of winning the draft lottery. Okay, but now what? Because you may be in a situation where a team's been in a much more difficult division, but they're a better team, they get a lower point total, and now suddenly they have better odds of winning the lottery, or they end up getting the number 4 draft pick, and maybe a team that's worse gets the number 7. And this is what's going to make this even more interesting is the fact that, and I'm going to put this at number 4. Again, it's connected, because what I'm going to tag this draft as is it's a complete wildcard draft. So now you've got a situation where the divisions aren't equal. So that's one topic. You've got the lottery debate that's going to continue. The draft lottery is going to be this major thing. Even though it won't be 2 phases this year, it'll just be the one, right? But then you've got the fact that the draft, you're going to have the WHL. Still, we don't know the start date for the WHL. We don't know the start date for the OHL. The QMJHL is supposed to come back early next month, but we don't know what that's going to look like, what they're going to do. They're going to have some kind of a winning percentage to decide seedings for the playoffs. And so you're not going to have scouts able to get the kind of notes on players they normally would. So we may see a situation where a team's maybe drafting 25th overall and they get a much better player than the guy taken 5th because the draft is up in the air. So look for all 3 of these things to happen in this order, where people are upset. My team's out of the playoffs because they're in a rougher division than that team that's in the playoffs. Then we're going to get to the draft lottery, and then it's going to switch. Then it's going to be, well, wait a minute. That team was in a more difficult division. They shouldn't be in the lottery. They're too good for the lottery. And then when they win the lottery and they go through the draft, then we're going to be saying, yeah, but we don't really know who's who in the draft this year, and the draft's kind of a up in the air kind of thing. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a very, very interesting time this year. I'm looking forward to probably more arguing than normal And this is a YouTube channel, and I'm looking forward to more arguing than usual. Number 3, and this is going to take a while to get used to. No. Sorry, I started writing a D, and then I realized, nope, that's not what I want to do, and then it just... I should just put baseball. But I'm not going to do that. Baseball type schedule. So back-to-backs against the same team in their building. Maybe 5 games in a row against the same team. Baseball, this is normal. This is standard. You just, 5 games, that's once through your rotation, right? Or through your rotation and then your 5th starter who's like an opener. And baseball's a whole other headache for me. But I'm like, why is he only pitch an inning? What does an opener mean? How old am I? So baseball type schedule is going to lead to some really fun games. But just think about this for a second. So you're Toronto, and you're going, okay, so we're 5 points ahead of Edmonton, and so we're doing really well. Well, now our next 3 games are against Calgary, and Edmonton is going to play Ottawa for the next 4. There's going to be some times like that, and it's going to be tough to get used to that, right? But on a related note, number 2, new rivalries. The new rivalries, it's going to be great. Now, for some who are looking at the divisional format right now, they're going to be like, I'm sad I don't get to see matchups between my teams this year. I'm not going to see Dallas and Minnesota against each other, Dallas and St. Louis against each other. What's going to happen without them playing against each other? But I think the new rivalries are going to override that. I think that by the time we're a month into the season, this whole idea of just playing against teams in your division will pick up steam. Now, I have been a proponent for a long time that once we get to that 32 team mark with Seattle, you're playing so few teams against every team, or so few games against every team in the league, that those rivalries aren't really the same. It doesn't feel the same. And I would be a proponent of, and I understand the NHL will never do this, but the idea of playing just strictly within your own conference. And, I mean, you can have interconference games, maybe 1 game a year. And I remember they did this before, and fans went nuts because, in Vancouver, you wouldn't see Montreal for 2 years. You wouldn't see Toronto for 2 years. You wouldn't see Boston for 2 years. But I really like the idea of the rivalry games. And maybe coming out of this year, fans, maybe owners, maybe everybody will say, you know what, this rivalry thing works. And it's great. I really missed having it feel like the rivalries of the good old days. And again, it comes up to, I know I'm a lot older than a lot of the people who watch these videos. I also remember when the rivalries were red hot. And you could, if you had a loss against a team that was a rival, you knew you were playing them again in a couple weeks anyways. And now it might be you have a rivalry game in October, and then you look at the schedule and go, man, that was such a great game. When do they play each other again? And it's not till like January. So it takes some of the starch out of it. And I mean, so I'm looking forward to the new rivalries. Now, the number one thing we're going to have to contend with, we're already starting to see this, is the border. So the reason that we have these divisions the way that they are is, of course, because the Canadian and the American border is closed. And it's been closed since March. So I've had mail piling up in the States since March, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get access to it until, I'll say, April at the earliest. But that 14-day quarantine coming into Canada means Canadian teams are not likely to make trades, not with American teams. And then the other problem is, so now you're going to make a trade in your own division against a rival you're going to play 9 or 10 times this year? I don't know how that's going to work. So when we get to the trade deadline, I'm going to go ahead and say no Canadian teams at the trade deadline this year will be in any position to rent anybody from another team. So if Toronto is right on the cusp, let's just say Toronto's first, and they look like they could be a real true contender. They need that one piece. It won't come from an American team because that player potentially, because the trade deadline's in April, we don't know that the border will necessarily be open by then. And if it is, it'll probably be April 21st. So if you acquire a player and he's got to go through 2 weeks of quarantine after entering Canada, well, that's what, 6-7 games that he's going to miss. after the trade deadline, there's not much point. So the 14-day quarantine is going to dramatically affect things league-wide, because that's 7 teams now in Canada that won't be trading at the deadline with teams south of the border. And not only that, but if I'm a player with the no trade clause or no movement clause, and let's say I'm in Florida, and Florida comes to me and goes, hey, are you willing to waive your no trade to go to Montreal? My response might normally be, yeah, I'll go to Montreal. That'd be great. But that response might change to, but then I don't get to play for 2 weeks. Now I got to sit for 14 days in quarantine before I can even get on the ice. I don't want to do that. So it may change things from a player's perspective, from teams' perspectives, and it really, truly kind of isolates the Canadian division from the other divisions. So, and we're starting to see that too with signings and trades, right? Where Ottawa's made a couple of trades this week. Those guys all entering this country would then have to enter a 14-day quarantine before they're free to join their teammates. It makes a big difference. So there you go. Which unique situation to the 2020-2021 season are you looking forward to? And if your answer is going to be, well, it's not even in 2020, it's just in 2021. Yep, I know. That's one of those unique things, but it's not completely unique because we did the same thing in 1995 and we did it in 2013. So we're just following along with that 8 years after the last time we did it. But hey, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for your support. Happy holidays. I'll talk to you again soon.